Наступне у нас буде онлайн-включення. Це буде чудова спікерка, науковиця. Одразу скажу, що вона українського походження, буде виступати англійською мовою. Хочу нагадати про наших друзів, наших техніків, які вам допоможуть, якщо потрібні комусь перекладач. Можете просто ось позаду, хлопці, можете ще раз підняти руку, будь ласка, щоб вас знайшли. Ось там. Тому можете підійти, вам дадуть навушники і ви можете повернутися на своє місце. Ну що ж, зараз у нас на екранах з'явиться Поліна Лішко, професорка клітинної біології та фізіології, Університет Вашингтону, Сент-Луїс, США. Поліна – це єдина науковиця українського походження, яка отримала спеціальний грант, який називається «Грант для геніїв» на суму $635 тисяч. Зараз перевіримо, Поліна, якщо ви нас чуєте, ми готові. Будь ласка, ми готові. Можна нам технічно ще, якщо маємо змогу, вивести нам нашу шановну спікерку на екран, щоб ми зрозуміли, що все готове технічно, що нас чутно. І нагадаю, що після виступу Поліни у нас буде, як зазвичай, сесія запитань та відповідей. Можете ставити запитання і українською, і англійською. Так, ми бачимо вас, Поліна. Добрий день.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we are here.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Wonderful. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to join you tonight. Do you see my slides? Perfect. Awesome. So thank you again for organizers. It's a really great honor to be here with you. And today I'm going to tell you about some of the work that we are doing in our laboratory and how this work is related to general health, how we can improve our health with this knowledge. And I'll also tell you about what is bioelectricity and why we are so interested about it. First, let me tell you about my scientific journey. I started from, of course, I got my education in Ukraine. I graduated from Taras Shevchenko National University and then worked in Institute of Physiology, Bogomolets Institute of Physiology, when I learned a lot of useful techniques, knowledge, which I currently use in our research team. And then I did my practice, postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Medical School, and eventually moved to California when I started my own research group at University of California, Berkeley. And currently my lab moved to Washington University in St. Louis, where this is where we are located right now. This is our research team. So what are we working on? We are working on basic science with a translation application studying bioelectricity. And bioelectricity is basically electrical signaling which connect every single cell in our body and make us grow, make us age, and plays a role in everything starting from fertilization and reproduction to the growth of our organism and eventually towards the aging. We are interested in understanding how bioelectricity can help us to have a better vision, to have a better health, and in all other aspects of our existence. So today I'm going to tell you more about our work related to the healthy vision and how we can treat some diseases which known as age-related macular degeneration, when people lose eyesight at the age of 60 or older, or how we can prevent our brain and make it healthy and prevent certain conditions such as traumatic brain injury. So first, let me tell you what is bioelectricity. It's a key area, not only key area of neurobiology, physiology, and bioengineering. It's not just our neurons or muscles which produce bioelectricity, but every cell, as I mentioned, starting from a simple cell like sperm cell and egg, which is relying on bioelectrical signaling to find each other, as well as our immune system, our gastrointestinal system, everything works based on electrical signaling that every single cell produces. Again, brain, muscle, eye, as well as epithelial cell, the cell which produce very important liquids in our body, such as cerebrospinal fluid or CSF. So let me tell you more. What is it and why we should care a great deal about this liquid? So let me take you to the journey into our brain. So I hope this movie plays. So right underneath our skull and underneath the tiny layers known as dura mater or meninges lays our brain, the cerebrum. And inside the cerebrum, right underneath it, there is a 3 big cavities known as ventricles. We have 4 of them. We have 2 lateral ventricles, and we have a 3rd ventricle here, and we have a 4th ventricle, goes a little bit closer to the bottom of our brain. And inside those ventricles, there is a structure known as choroid plexus. And this choroid plexus is basically a very simple tissue which has a blood capillary inside and cells known as epithelial cells. Those cells produce cerebrospinal fluid. So the structure inside our ventricles, you see those are lateral ventricle, the 3rd ventricle, and the 4th. And the CSF or cerebrospinal fluid constantly moves, as you can see from this movie, from the ventricles into the subarachnoid space around our brain, and eventually it returns through the venous system into our venal circulation and into the heart through the many filtration mechanism. So again, this liquid, which is produced inside our brain, is a key to our health and healthy brain function. So what do we need this liquid for? Well, we need it for 3 main purposes. Again, this is a simplified version of the tissue. It has blood capillary here, and it has the cells known as the choroid plexus epithelial cells, which produce this fluid, the liquid. So, yes, cerebrospinal fluid, we need it for protection. So every time we shake our head, right, our brain doesn't just bump into the skull, right? It's protected by the liquid which surrounds it. It's protected by CSF. Second is buoyancy. Our brain is a heavy matter, right? It weighs about 1.5 kilograms. But since it's suspended in the cerebrospinal fluid, in CSF, it's very light. It only weighs about 25, 50 grams. Therefore, the brain, as heavy as it is, it does not crash on itself. It's supported by this fluid. And the third function, which is also very important, is to remove waste and byproduct of the brain function. So every time we engage in heavy thinking and everything, our brain generates a lot of byproduct, a lot of waste. And this waste has to be removed from the cerebrospinal fluid through those cells and goes into blood capillaries and is removed from our brain. So what happens if this process does not work normally? So first of all, at any given time, we have about 150 milliliters, a very small amount of that liquid, of that fluid, every time, at any given time in our brain. But this tissue, the choroid plexus, produces about 600 milliliters of CSF every day. So essentially, this liquid circulates and renews itself 4 times per day. And as we get older, this process slows down. And at 77-year-old person, that happens 3 times per day. People who suffer from Alzheimer's disease and neurodegeneration diseases, they have turnover rate very slow, 2 times per day, which means their CSF cannot be cleared, cannot be purified from byproduct waste. And essentially, Alzheimer's disease could be considered as accumulation of waste in our brain. Not surprisingly, this happens when the level of circulating steroid hormones, testosterone in men, estrogen, progesterone in women, goes down with age. And there is a connection between how long people are exposed to these reproductive hormones. And if the exposure is a short time, if, for example, menopause starts early in women, there is a high risk of Alzheimer's disease. So what we study is the connection, how this exposure to steroid hormones and whether supplementation with steroid hormones can help to delay or maybe cure certain diseases such as Alzheimer's disease. So what other function cerebrospinal fluid and carotid plexus does in our body, right? So first of all, when dysfunction of this tissue can result in early pathologies known as hydrocephalus. Their dysfunction of CSF is more common in women than in men, surprisingly. And with age, this tissue becomes less functional. It loses a certain number of cells, it becomes destroyed. It also can cause migraines because there insufficient production of cerebrospinal fluid triggers migraines. And migraines are known to correlate with the level of steroid hormones. In fact, women who have particularly irregular periods or who have imbalance in cerebrospinal fluid develop migraines often. Also, idiopathic intracranial hypertension, too much liquid in the brain, is very uncomfortable condition. And I told you about Alzheimer's disease, which leads with enlargement of the ventricle and disbalance in the CSF and triggers degradation of the neuronal tissue. So, traumatic brain injury. Very unpleasant condition. What's happened if our brain, if our head is hit too hard? It will result in a lot of side effects such as stroke, cancer, and also can trigger Alzheimer's disease later in the life. And traumatic brain injury reflects into dysfunction of carotid plexus to produce sufficient level of CSF or to remove it from the brain. And as a result, there is a swelling, accumulation of a liquid in some part of the brain, which leads to a lot of side effects and even mortality. So, of course, military personnel are more unfortunately prone to traumatic brain injury, but it happens during car accident, falls, injuries, and so on. Interestingly, it was found early on, many decades ago, that females are more protected, not protected, but they survive better after traumatic brain injury events than males. And it started the research looking more into specific steroid hormones that are produced more in women's, in female body than in male. And progesterone was found to be a very important molecule helping brain to recover and heal faster. In fact, this study shows that depend on the concentration of the steroid hormone and depending on the delivery, whether it could be injected and how often it could be injected, the outcome from the traumatic brain injury could be more favorable. So, what are steroid hormones? We have many of them. They're all synthesized from cholesterol, and women have progesterone and estrogen, right? And men have testosterone. And most of the time, the classical mechanism how steroid hormones alter the function of our cell is by going inside the cells and changing how different signal proteins the cell can produce. But there is another mechanism, less studied and very interesting mechanism when steroid hormones binds to the targets, to the receptor on the surface of the cell, and activates certain ion influx inside the cell, triggering bioelectrical event, activating currents, electrical currents inside the cell, and changing the cell functionality. And this is what we study. So this is a choroid plexus from the mouse, and you can see the blood flow through its different pathways. We can isolate cells from those tissue. The cells look like this. They surround blood capillaries. And we can study directly electrical event going through every single cell, so we can understand what carries those electrical events and how we can activate, how we can stimulate it, so we can make tissue working more efficiently when we need this tissue to work more efficiently, right? So this is isolation of this choroid plexus from the mouse brain. We can isolate the cells. We can attach a tiny glass electrode, recording pipette, to the surface of the cell. We can make very tight contact, and those green dots are structures, proteins known as ion channels. They are literally the gates through which ions go inside and outside of the cell. And as ion flows through the cell, they produce electrical current. So that's how we do it. This is a simplified version of our instruments. When we have a microscope, and we have computers, and we have amplifiers, because these currents are very tiny, you have to make glass electrodes relatively small, within few microns, to be able to record from those tiny structures. And when we did so and record from the choroid plexus cells, we were able to see a surprising event. So usually we don't see any much current shown here in black or blue. But when we apply progesterone, steroid hormones, which are known to help brain to heal better, and it's known as P4 here, we're able to see increase in electrical event. So in fact, when we apply progesterone several times and wash it out, we're able to see that currents, this electrical event, becomes more potent. And this response was stronger in females. So when we isolated cells from female mouse brain, we were able to see that progesterone acts much more stronger than in male. And after many other researches, we tried to find out what is the target, what progesterone does, how does it trigger this electrical activities. And we found out that culprit, the protein which responds to progesterone, is this channel, ion channel. It's known as abbreviation HIR7-1. It's a potassium channel. It's a protein which is expressed in the apical, the side of the epithelial cells, and it moves potassium ions out of the cell. And as it does so, it basically regulates, it directs the flow of all other liquids and ions. So it's a master operator of the function of the structure. And this channel is activated by progesterone. So mice which don't have this protein, they don't survive long, which is not surprising. And that's a proposed structure of this protein. So it has a pore through which potassium ions flow, and that's how bioelectrical event happens. And now we are trying to understand how we can activate this channel with something which is not progesterone, because you cannot just inject progesterone without potential side effects. We need something more, something better, which could specifically target this channel and allowed, it could be a therapeutical factor to help traumatic brain injury patients. So I want to now switch gear and tell you about another function of the same protein in a tissue, in an organ, which is somewhat similar to the choroid plexus. So choroid plexus has its brother, and this tissue is expressed inside our eye, is present inside our eye, and the tissue which does very similar function as choroid plexus inside the eye is called retinal pigment epithelium. It is located here, right between our sensitive photosensitive cells known as photoreceptors, and RP, shown here in white, is a caretaker tissue inside our eye, which, just like choroid plexus in the brain, in the eye, this tissue maintains the health of our photosensitive cells. So without retinal pigment epithelium, without RP, we will lose eyesight. And what this tissue does, it maintains the health, it removes the junk, it removes the waste from very actively functioning photoreceptors. They are light sensitive cells of our eye. So what happens if this tissue is not working properly? Same as in the brain, the waste, the byproduct, the junk will accumulate. And with age, and not surprisingly again, it happens more often in women, and it's correlated with the level of steroid hormones. The accumulation of this waste deposit becomes more and more, and they form this yellow bodies, structures known as drusen. And that triggers disease, which is known as age-related macular degeneration, AMD, which is the main cause of blindness in people over 60. There is no cure, and sadly, there is not much treatment available. And initially, when just drusen formation happens, it's called a dry form. But when it continues to go like this, eventually it creates local inflammation. And what happens afterwards, then blood vessel starts to grow, and inside those damaged tissue, and destroy more and more of our eye, and that triggers so-called wet form of AMD, which is the late stage of the disease. So currently, what is available to treat that form of AMD's late form is basically a not very pleasant treatment, is injection of the factors which will prevent growth of the blood vessel directly into the eye. But the early form, when this waste formation just begin to form, there is no treatment available and no cure. So obviously, we need to do something about this. And we think that this protein, this potassium channel, which is master regulator of the function in the choroid plexus and in the retinal pigment epithelium, and its activation by progesterone might be a key, a help to create novel therapies to give people a chance to keep their eyesight for longer. So another explanation, another example where the same protein function very effectively and the same regulation of this protein by progesterone takes place is surprisingly during pregnancy. So it has been known for many time that in female body, the high level of progesterone is absolutely important to keep pregnancy going. And I will return to the slide in a second, but I want to show you that if progesterone given to the pregnant woman and the contraction of the uterus is recorded, because uterus is also very strong bioelectrical organ, is the strongest smooth muscle in human body, and it can contract on itself. And if it contracts too strongly, the premature births happen and woman will lose a child. But high level of progesterone help to pacify this very strong bioelectrical activity and keep uterus calm, to keep it pacified and allow pregnancy to continue. So if progesterone levels are low, many women can lose their pregnancy. The pregnancy could be terminated. And right now, not many treatments exist. So progesterone injection is the only treatment available. There was a compound known as derivative of progesterone, 17-hydroxyprogesterone caprate, known as Makina. Unfortunately, FDA currently took it from the market in the United States because they did not know how it worked, surprisingly. So what we knew is that before that this potassium channel, which is important for choroid plexus function, retinal pigment epithelial function, is also expressed in the pregnant uterus at the very late stage, at the third trimester. And it was shown that this is important. It's one of the regulator of uterine contraction. So we knew that progesterone is needed to keep uterine calm. And this structure, this TIR7.1, this potassium channel is also needed to keep it calm. So what we found out that progesterone is actually, that's how it works. It keeps this channel active, and the channel keeps smooth muscles, prevents smooth muscles from contraction. So what we decided to explore, how exactly this compound works. And it's turned out this drug, a derivative of progesterone, 17-hydroxyprogesterone caprate, is very effective activator of this channel. So when progesterone is injected, it does not live in the body long. It's activated, and then basically its effect goes away very quickly. We are talking about 2 minutes, 3 minutes therapeutical effect. But when this compound is introduced, it stays in the circulation longer. It takes longer to act, between 8 to 16 minutes, right? So this compound is more effective activator of this master regulator of uterine contractions. And one of the goal right now is to find a better, more efficient activators, more efficient compounds, which could make this channel more active. And as a result, this therapy could provide help for patients suffering from traumatic brain injury, for elder patients who are losing eyesight, as well as for pregnant women to make sure that premature birth does not happen. Okay, so just to conclude this part, I told you about one of the examples how a protein, a relatively less known protein, but engaging in a bioelectrical event, became a good molecular target to develop therapies for different diseases such as losing eyesight, age-related macular degeneration, insufficiency of the cerebrospinal fluid production, and how it also could be used as a good target to treat preterm labor, preterm birth, and help many pregnant women. So, and thank you so much for your attention. This is my email. If you have any questions after today, please feel free to email me, and I will be happy to provide any other information on the topic.
Ну що ж, у нас є можливість задати запитання. Якщо у когось є, підійміть, будь ласка, руку, до вас підійдуть з мікрофоном. Будь ласка. Чи є запитання? І якщо немає, а ось є в другому ряді, будь ласка.
Англійською?
Я думаю, що як вам буде зручно, але якщо можете англійською, будь ласка.
Hello.
Можу відповідь.
My name is Kirill. I have a question. Is it possible to adjust some sort of a hormone therapy to a person who is just to slow their aging? Just in general, just for general health, not for treating specific illnesses or something.
Very good question, Kirill. Thank you so much. Yes, hormonal replacement therapy is right now one of the potential treatment and prevention. It's used for both men and women. I forgot to mention that, for example, this potassium channel is not only activated by progesterone, but is also activated by certain androgen. So it acts in male and female bodies similarly. But yes, so testosterone supplementation for men and progesterone estrogen supplementation for women is very beneficial, especially for women. Estrogen supplementation is needed to keep bone density, because this is the first thing which goes down. The bone density decreases, which triggers osteoporosis, more fragile bones in women. And in fact, it has been shown, as I mentioned before, that early exposure, short exposure to steroid hormones, so later puberty or early menopause or andropause, can increase risk. So if we give our body more time, because to have this exposure to steroid hormones, but of course, those compounds are very powerful molecules. The person should not overuse them. They should be given at the right amount at right time. And clinicians, doctors know precise therapy time frame. They would be extremely beneficial.
Thank you. Давайте ще раз поаплодуємо. Дякуємо. Поліна, thank you for your
Thank you.
joining.
Дякую.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Я хотів би... Давайте ще раз поаплодуємо Поліні, вона нас чує. Дякуємо.